So, Chazzy, I thought, as I'm going to be listening to music all weekend at the festival, we should do a music special, except get this, all of the music will be from the Sega Mega Drive.
I'm not being funny, man, but I've heard enough Mega Drive music as a kid to last me a lifetime.
Oh, it'll be really good though, I promise you, man.
Okay, look, let's look at the things that you've said are good on the show so far. Sonic Generations, someone losing their job, Nia, an inappropriate llama disaster, for God's sake.
Oh, they're all bloody good. Well, except the guy losing his job.
Look, I know you love your chip music, but it's really not my cup of tea, man. I'm going to go and play Battlefield and listen to some MC Hammer or something, if that's alright with you.
Yeah, fair enough, dude. But don't come running to me when Hammer really does hurt him.
Okay, mate, whatevs. Give me a shout when you're nearly done, yeah?
No probs. Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the AI Boss podcast. I'm Dan Clark, and not with me is Chazzy, because as you heard in the intro, he's buggered off to play a bit of shooty face. The reason for that is that this episode is going to be a little bit different. We're meant to be recording on the Sunday, and I'm going to be away at the Latitude Festival, in some field, listening to a weird band with a pint of cider in my hand, something like that. So we thought we'd give you a bit of music to listen to, so you can kind of get into that festival vibe. Now, it's all going to be from the Mega Drive, or Genesis if you're that way inclined. But don't let that put you off, because although the Mega Drive kind of gets remembered as being quite tinny and metallic and quite cheap sounding, I think most people are looking through whatever would be the opposite of rose-tinted glasses for your ears. I guess a brown-tinted hearing aid. But yeah, if you're going to listen to this show, I implore you to use headphones, because the Mega Drive does some amazing tricks with stereo that I think you'd really like to listen to. Also, what I've found is that Mega Drive music seems to act almost as a time capsule for the different genres that were going on in the late 80s, early 90s. So I found industrial techno, acid house, grunge, dub, and mixes and mangles of all of the above. So where do I start? Well, there's one obvious place, and that's the soundtrack to Revenge of Shinobi or Super Shinobi, depending on where you're from. It's by Yuzo Koshiro, and he was one of the guys who was first known for experimenting with what the chip could do outside of the usual drivers and libraries. He was doing what was called at the time writing to the chip. I suppose it still would be, where he was accessing more of what the system could do than anyone else at the time. Now, this track reminds me of Bat Dance by Prince from the 1989 Tim Burton Batman film, which is the same year the game was released. Now, strangely, in Japan, Super Shinobi had Batman as a boss character, although Sega hadn't actually asked DC Comics, so it was removed from subsequent releases for obvious reasons. Now, what I really love about this track is that it's got an awesome, although slightly rubbish, approximation of a vinyl scratch noise, kind of chippy chippy chip chip. Yeah, so look out for that. The track's called Ninja Step. Even within a few months of the system's launch, he's pulling out some amazing sounds from that little FM chip. And Koshiro has said he was trying to emulate the sounds that were going on in the burgeoning dance scene at the time. He even managed to wangle a trip to London to visit acid house clubs and techno clubs when he was researching the Streets of Rage soundtrack. But influences can flow both ways, and Koshiro's work inspired a lot of the UK composers in development at the time. The next track is by Martin Iverson and Nathan McCree from the game Bubba and Sticks. Now this is a little bit later in the Mega Drive's life, when a bit more had been worked out of what you could do with the chip, and this has got a dubby feel, which you don't really expect to see anything quite as sort of soulful on such a sort of metallic sounding chip. I really like this tune. It ends up quite jazzy, all goes a bit weird, but in a nice way. Both went on to compose for the Tomb Raider games, and Martin Iverson's now a successful jazzy house producer under the name @Jazz. I even had some of his tracks and I didn't realise it was the same guy. I found it near impossible to whittle the Bubba and Sticks soundtrack to one tune, but I couldn't resist the beautiful trombones of Alien Forest. Another dubby tune for you next, but it's probably slightly closer to what we now call dubstep, which obviously didn't exist at the time. But if you think what chiptune dubstep sounds like now, then go with me on this one. This is kind of that idea. But you remember all games used to have a desert level, a minecart level, a snow level. Now, the desert level usually had an Arabic or Middle Eastern sounding tune of some kind. And Contra Hardcore from Konami is no exception. Now, the soundtrack is attributed to 3 different composers. There's Akihata, who's known for anime soundtracks nowadays. There's Castlevania composer Michiru Yamane, and a chap called Hiroshi Kobayashi. Now I've looked into this, and there's a famous Japanese footballer called Hiroshi Kobayashi, and a famous Japanese boxer also by the name of Hiroshi Kobayashi. But in terms of video game soundtracks, there only seems to be 2 references to the name, and both of those references are for the games that Konami was working on when Treasure left Konami to form their own development studio. So my thinking is, with Yamane and Hata both being women, that an alias was used for the guy who'd left the company, Norio Hanzawa. And what better in-joke than to use the alias of 2 famous sportsmen? I think it would be like a Western developer nowadays using the name Chuck Norris or Manly McManus to get across that, yes, there was a male composer on this, but contractually we can't say who it was. Anyway, enough of my mad theories, here's Jurassic Dope. My next choice is from one of the most well-known composers in gaming nowadays, Jesper Kyd. We probably know him better today as the composer of Assassin's Creed, Borderlands and the Hitman games. But back in the 90s, he was obviously in a very different place. His style on the system's unique. He was doing industrial techno meets Goa trance. Now that's exactly the kind of ravey electronic nonsense that I was into back then, so I love this track. You might think it's a bit dark, but it's got a real clubby feel, so I hope you enjoy it. This is the Joker's theme from The Adventures of Batman and Robin. Now, I figured you guys probably need something cheerier after that moody techno, so I've found one of the happiest tunes that exists on the Mega Drive. It's from the Wiz & Liz soundtrack, credited to Matt Furness and Sean Hollingworth, although to be fair, I think Sean just devised the sound driver that Matt used. Now, Matt is one of the most prolific composers of the 90s, with well over 100 games to his name, and in fact he's going to crop up in this show a bit later on too. So I'll quit my waffling and get straight on with the Mineland theme from Wiz & Liz. I love that silly little tune, and if you've never played Wiz & Liz, I suggest you give it a go. For my money, it's the best platformer on the Mega Drive, and that's saying something, because there's a lot of good games there, like Sonic, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, Sonic and Knuckles. I'm joking, of course, there's loads of great platformers on the Mega Drive, but yeah, this one is really worth a go. It does something different, and it's really fast-paced, even compared to Sonic. Anywho, next up is a track from the game Decap Attack. Now, this was a reskin of a Japanese game called Magical Hat Flying Turbo Adventure. There's various translations for the game's name. That's the one I'm going to go with because it's the easiest one for me to remember right now. It's a short and sweet traditional chiptune. It sounds very much like video game music. It's by a composer called Fumito Tamayama, and apparently he had more aliases in that era than anyone else in Japanese development. Now, if you've ever seen the credits for a Japanese 8 or 16-bit game, you'll see it's full of aliases, so that's really saying something. Here we go, it's level 5 from Decap Attack. told you it was short and sweet, but hey, I really like it, so there. Next up, we've got a bit of grunge from the USA. Now, there was an era in the early to mid-90s where you couldn't escape grunge. There were bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. This massive scene came out of Seattle, and it obviously didn't escape Sega's attention. So when they were making the music for their game Comix Zone, they got one of their in-house composers, Howard Drossin, to create a grunge soundtrack. Now, Drossin did a lot of in-house work for Sega, and he also composed for Baldur's Gate 2 a few years later. And most recently, he composed for the 2010 Splatterhouse reboot. Now, the American Sega devs used a pretty naff driver for their music. It's called Gems. You can find it on the net and give it a go. But Howard manages to get some decent guitar-y sounds out of the machine. You can almost hear Kurt Cobain over this. It's Seen It for Days from Comix Zone. While we're in an American guitar vibe, I found a track that is so the epitome of American meathead rock of the 90s that it's unintentionally hilarious. It's by a guy called Jeff Dyke. He now calls himself Jeff Van Dyke, and he's best known these days for the Total War series, so he's doing real big lush compositions. But back in the 90s he was EA's in-house composer for a lot of games. And you may recognise the track, we used it last week in our skit as KK Slider's metal song. I put some lyrics over the top of it. But hey, this time you get to enjoy it without the lyrics. I use enjoy in the loosest possible sense. The track also goes a bit Saved by the Bell partway through as well. So this is Cheese Grater from the game Skitchin.
Dan, you getting on all right, mate? You want a brew?
Yeah, it's not going too bad, man. Coffee, please.
How'd you like it?
I like my coffee like I like my women. Hot, strong, and available for £2.40 on the street corner of any major city.
Okay, milk and two then.
Yeah, perfect. Right, well, we're going to take a short break while I go and drink my coffee. But singers have included no Sonic music from the Mega Drive in the actual show. I thought I'd leave you with something special in the break. This is from an album called Loser, a Sega Genesis tribute album. It's by The Adventures of Dwayne and Brando. Now, what they did was they took a whole load of tracks from this double CD about the Mega Drive, from jazz to rock to hip-hop, all sorts. They put them all together and encapsulated the story of Sonic. So, yeah, that's going to be your break, and I'll catch you in a bit.
I got it under control, Tails. I'll get them shits back. When you fuck with a motherfucker like me, you'll get bitch smack. I'm way too fast, bitch, understand. Motherfuckers talk shit and get the back of my hand. Like all day long and every night. I keep it cool like my name was Vanilla Ice. But I'm blue, not white, not wrong, too bright. I'm so groovy, I'm out of sight. Like General Pat, I'm not talking about Mike. I'm old school, full Tails, take the mic. Okay, now go away, Tails. You're not old enough to fight Robotnik yet. Let's start with a doom, Sonic, I'm haunting your birds with my mean Hulk at the killing me. What the fuck did you say? I wasn't paying attention. I've destroyed you more times than I care to mention. Let's end this now. I got shit I gotta do. You motherfucker, fucking rubbity-doo. You won't call me the fuck. I'm the title. What's that? You said you're fat, we knew that. Yeah, right, motherfucker, tell that to Star Jones. Let me set it straight and send you back to your lab. You gotta lose there, wait, you gotta call yourself a cat. Where'd you go, Robotnik? You fucking live out here, you greasy, fat, smelly bitch. I'm gonna cook you over easy. Hump it, dump it. I said it. I really don't think that's gonna happen, Robotnik. I got the chaos and all supersonic. Not listening, don't care, motherfucker. Still not listening, I really don't care, motherfucker. Anyways, I'm gonna fucking tell you fucking shit apart. I got a shit I'm gonna find. I think I shot it. Oh
And I'm back. Now, before the break, we had some rocking Mega Drive stuff from America. Now we're going to head over to Japan, where they were still rocking out, but it seems to me more in a sort of prog rock vein, like their crazy keyboard solos and all that kind of stuff. Although this track goes from 70s synth metal to kind of easy listening cheese. The name of the song's Brawing Up. Now, brawing doesn't seem to be a word, although it could be derived from Scottish dialect, the word braw, meaning like looking good, or your bras can be your best clothes. So it could be brawing up is what these Japanese composers thought was sort of getting dressed up in your best gear. That's all I can think it is, and if you've got a better answer, then do send it in on a postcard to the usual address. So without further ado, here's Brawing Up from Battlemania Daiginji. My next choice is one of the more obscure tunes on the list. Now, not only is it from a football game, which aren't generally known for having the best music, it's from the pause menu for a football game. So if you ever paused Striker, the game by Rage Software, then you'll have heard this before, but I'm guessing only a handful of Mega Drive owners have really listened to this. It's by a guy called Kev Bruce, who only made 4 songs in his video game composing career, so I wonder what else he went on to do. I can't really find any details. So Kev, if you're out there, let us know. And here's his ravey, happy hardcore inspired pause menu music for Striker. Another rave-inspired curio next, this time from Pokemon director Junichi Masuda. Yes, you heard that right, the director of Pokemon composed some tunes on the Mega Drive. Now, obviously Game Freak are best known nowadays for their work with Nintendo, but they did make 2 games on the Mega Drive, one of them being Pulseman in 1994. It's a stunning game. If you've never played it, give it a go, although it's nothing like Pokemon. Now, Masuda still composes for the Pokemon series today, but his music doesn't really sound much like this. This is End Traceback from Pulseman. Now, before the track, I did say that Pulseman and Pokemon were totally different games, which is true, but one thing I've just remembered while listening to that is that Pikachu's attack, Volt Tackle, is named after and looks exactly like Pulseman's attack, Volt Tekka, which is the Japanese version of saying Volt Tackle. So, there you go. Now, I can't have techno from the Mega Drive without talking about the Streets of Rage soundtracks. They're often known as Yuzo Koshiro's best work on the system, and I'd have to agree with that. Heavily inspired by the dance scene of the time, I actually remember putting these on cassette from the sound test when I was a kid and playing them on the way to school on my massive Walkman. To be honest, I probably could have filled the show just with tracks from Streets of Rage 1, 2 and 3, and it was really difficult to decide which ones to play. But first up, I've gone for Yuzo Koshiro's Maxman from Streets of Rage 2. Now, history's going to remember Yuzo Koshiro as the composer of the Streets of Rage games, but for Streets of Rage 2 and 3, he had a co-composer, Motohiro Kawashima. Now, so that guy doesn't get forgotten, I'm going to play one of his tracks as well. It's from Streets of Rage 3, and this is his boss music. Those guys pulled off some unbelievable stuff on the Mega Drive. I can't believe he's got sub-bass in that last track. Like, how does the chip do that? Who knows? If you've never heard the Streets of Rage soundtracks, I suggest you find them on project2612.org. There you'll find every track that I've played today, actually, along with every other Mega Drive tune ever made. The site is an archiving project to try and keep all this stuff alive so that it never sort of goes away and dies when the cartridges all fade into obscurity and stop working. You'll find players on there to play the stuff on your Mac or PC, and thousands of tunes to trawl through. Now, I'm hoping that by now you've forgotten that I played a track from Contra Hardcore at the beginning, because I really want to play another one. So if I can get away with it, this is Zephyr from Contra Hardcore. If anyone says that I cheated by playing two songs from the same game, I'm going to say no, I didn't. One was from Contra Hardcore, the American release. The other was from Contra the Hardcore, the Japanese release. I could even get away with doing it 3 times because it was called Probotector in Europe, but don't worry, I'm not going to do 3. Next up is another tune from Nathan McCree, who we heard earlier co-composed on Bubba and Sticks. This is one of his tracks from a game called Skeleton Crew. It's Stage 6, Cadaver's Bass. Someone seriously needs to do a dubstep remix of that tune. It's even got the Wob Wobs, and they didn't even exist then. Coming up next is another track by Jesper Kyd. This is a beautiful song. It's the ending music from the game Subterranea. I'd love to hear that over a massive sound system in a field somewhere, just as the sun's coming up about 5 AM, people with hands in the air, whoop whoop, but it's never going to happen. Anyway, around 94, 95, jungle and drum and bass were pretty big in the UK, and you can see the sounds starting to manifest themselves in the Mega Drive soundtracks at the time. We've already had a song from Matt Furness and Sean Hollingworth, but they composed for an EA game called Boogerman. Now, the game's nothing special, but this track is kind of like comedy drum and bass, or like cartoony drum and bass. It's called Mucus Mountains, and the breakbeat is absolutely brilliant. Here you go. Now, this has been in no way a definitive list of Mega Drive tunes. It's just ones that I find quite relevant to sort of music today more than anything else. But before we get to what I think are my favourite two tracks at the moment on the system, we've got a couple of requests, although the people sending them in didn't really know they were requests at the time. We just said, what is your favourite tune on the Mega Drive? Now, first up, it's another tune from Matt Furness, so 2 in a row for him. This was requested by Ryan Astley, and it's the Stage 1 music from Alien 3. Nice choice there, Mr. Astley. Now, the next request we had was from Sir Moni Phipps. He did actually give 2 requests. He said one and then came back with another. But I'm afraid, like all good quiz shows, we have to take your first answer. Partly because we weren't sure of the legalities of playing a Michael Jackson tune on here, and partly because neither of us really like Michael Jackson very much. So here's Stage 1, Jam in Jungle from Mega Bomberman. Massive thanks to Simone Phipps and Ryan Astley for your requests, and if you ever see us on Twitter asking what is your favourite tune on the system, then you can probably guess what we're up to for the next time. I'm going to be cheeky next. I've just found a tune that I made from college that was my tribute to Mega Drive music and Yuzo Koshiro specifically. About 80% of the sounds would have been possible on the Mega Drive at the time. The guitar wouldn't have been as realistic and the beats probably wouldn't have been quite so crisp. But other than that, here's my track, Starsky and Bass. If by any remarkable chance anyone wants that as a free MP3 download, then do find me on Twitter @TheAIBots, and I'll send you a link to my SoundCloud where you can download it for free. Now we're coming right to the end of the show, and I've got 2 tracks left, but believe me, they're stunners. First up, it's Jesper Kyd again, with a track from the game Red Zone. This is called Headquarter. I love the way Jesper manages to get the Mega Drive chip to sound like a Commodore 64 SID chip at some points. Stunning stuff. And now we reach the final track. Now this one's got a bit of a sad story behind it. No one's really heard this song because the game it's from was unreleased. It's another track by, drumroll, you guessed it, Matt Furness and Sean Hollingworth, and it's taken from a prototype of a game called Rescue. That's R-E-S-Q. It was to be released by Core Design, but I think it was so close to the PlayStation and Saturn that they just thought it wasn't really time to release a Mega Drive game. But this song is, to my mind, the best track on the Mega Drive. It's chiptune drum and bass, maybe 15 years before that term even existed or made any sense. It's an absolute corker. Hope you enjoy it. This is Level 3A from Rescue. I could listen to that all day. In fact, it sounds like a subgenre of drum and bass called liquid funk, which didn't even exist for maybe 4 or 5 years after this was composed. So yeah, it's really ahead of its time, I think. Anyway, that's all the tunes I've got time for, so I better see what Chazzy's up to, see if he wants to come back. Chazzy, I think I'm pretty much done if you want to come and help close the show.
Alright fella, just come in, just want to check my match stats.
No probs. So, thanks for listening. I'd love to know what you thought of this show. You can...
Right, yeah, I'm back. Where have we got up to?
I was just about to give out the Twitters and the emails, dude. Nice timing.
Alright, so you can do the usual, find us on Twitter at the AI Bots and send us an email at theaibots.com, yeah?
Well, I was gonna, but it looks like you've just done that.
Oh, I guess we're done then.
Yeah, seems that way.
Cool. Right, I'll speak to you later then, mate.
Yeah, speak to you next week, dude. Bye-bye.
Bye.